Attention on deck. Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your hosts, Kelord, Kami Samurai, and Vanacera.
Hello and welcome to episode 89 of the Warships Podcast. I'm your host, Keller, and Arun and Vanessa are here today as well, as we have a ton of new ships to test and new legendary modules to cover. I do apologize about the introduction. I still have not been able to get it changed to have Arun's name in it, so I do apologize about that. First, I wanted to give a quick update on DreamHack. This weekend, Kami arrived safely from California, and for my birthday on Sunday, we went down to the DreamHack Expo here in Austin. Wargaming North America had a huge booth there for both tanks and ships, with lots of people trying out both games from the crowd. We got to meet a lot of cool Wargaming folks. We got to meet people who had never played ships and were coming up to try it. And, we were able to have the first experience be a good one, which was a really cool experience. We had a good time talking to the head guy from the tanks at the Austin office, and we actually got to learn some cool things about some new modes in World of Tanks that we're kind of excited that they might try someday in ships. Keep on a lookout for more conferences and expo visits from Wargaming North America this year, as I know that they're trying to get to more of those this year and get their presence out there and get more people interested in the game. They did give away some pretty cool prizes like headsets and keyboards and things like that to people that were actually able to make it and were checking their Twitter and things. I even have some Marblehead codes to give away that I will be doing later this week, so keep an eye on Twitter for that. With that out of the way, let's get our discussion started with the long-awaited HMCS Haida. Currently labeled Cossack in-game, we're told that the 3x2 arrangement with 120mm guns will be solely for the Haida Premium. With a single quad-torp launcher with 8km torps, Haida is an interesting departure from destroyer norms because she includes the creeping smoke style like Perth and has a 3-minute, on the premium side, hydroacoustic that detects ships up to 3.2 kilometers away at Tier 7. I guess for you guys, is the uniqueness of Haida a positive or a negative? Because there's actually been some arguing among the CCs about if Haida's in a good place or not.
This ship is, as I feel, one of those kind of special ships out there, almost like USS Enterprise. And when you talk about Haida, you're talking about a ship that is extremely important, especially to a lot of the Canadian base, but just a lot of historical or players who love historical ships in general. This is a current museum ship. It's the only remaining tribal class destroyer ship available out there to go and see in the world. And so it's a really big deal to a lot of people. So you definitely want to make sure that, the ship is not terrible, just because of its sheer importance to a lot of people that, in a historical sense and present day. That being said, I think I'm going to borrow a little bit from Little White Mouse, because I played the ship and it took a while for me to kind of get into the ship, but after kind of reading her breakdown and what she was doing with the ship, I began to understand, kind of the unique aspects and qualities of this. And it's a escort destroyer, and it's really good at doing that. Kind of borrowing from her setup, she did a vigilance setup with the sonar module and played it screening for the fleet and kind of, screening, escorting, and interdicting, but still, using those guns. Those guns actually are pretty effective. Granted, you got to be pretty close, but I mean, you can sneak up, you can creep up on enemy destroyers, especially if they're hiding in smoke, and you can screen for torpedoes, enemy torpedoes, for a very long time. So it is very unique. It is a support and escorting destroyer, and it can do it pretty dang well. And when you play in that support role in that aspect, you can really enjoy the ship. Is it going to be for everyone? No. Is the, the style of gameplay for everyone? No, I don't think everyone, is of necessarily the mindset of trying to be a support role or support player. But if you adopt that, I think you're really going to like the ship. But I do see the arguments of some of the other community contributors and testers in the fact that, the ship could use some help in a lot of different categories. And I hope it does receive that, because this is Haida we're talking about, not just, a different destroyer. This is a very significant ship to a lot of people.
I'll be honest, I don't really feel very strongly about the ship, because it's a destroyer that's below tier 8, and I feel like destroyers below tier 8 usually aren't very fun to play, because you don't have access to the same concealment level as you do at the higher tiers. Like, even if your specific ship has it, not everyone has it, which makes the game a lot less fun, in my opinion. The other thing is that destroyers at that tier tend to not have all the convenience features, like turret traverse. And as a whole, this makes the lower tier destroyers for me really unappealing. So unfortunately, the ship isn't very interesting to me, despite, all that she does bring with her uniqueness.
I guess for me, the concealment thing is kind of a wash. We're getting some rumors that they may nerf the concealment some. Right now it's at 5.7 kilometers, and I outspotted all the other destroyers in the match that I played, except for and because I didn't have any of the IJN ones that get access to the module. So for me, I felt the concealment was actually in a really good spot even without the module.
Oh, no. I'll interject. So what I'm saying is that I agree with you there, but I think that because the other ships at those tiers don't have it, it makes the game a lot less interesting from the destroyer's perspective, because you're not like at the same level, right, as the other guy.
So you're talking about like in general destroyers, not
in
just
in general.
Gotcha.
I was talking in general here.
Honestly, my biggest problems with the ship that I had playing it were, one, the turret traverse was not appealing, and two, the single bank of 4 torpedo launchers was difficult to get in big hits on anything. Now I realize that and the reload is okay, but it's not like blindingly fast or something, or you don't get a torpedo reload booster like Akizuki. So you don't have any like big punch. I found that I was able to like ward off a cruiser coming after me, but battleships you just didn't want to tangle with. From the punch side on the guns, the guns are fantastic for hunting destroyers, but pretty much meh for everything else, in my opinion.
About the single launch or single set of torpedoes, the problem is that you can't really cover an area, right? And because, torpedoes still take a while to get there, it means that when you fire the torpedoes, you basically have to guess where the opponent is going to be very, very accurately. If you only have one set, if you have two, you can predict 2 different spots. And I agree with you. The one launcher quite isn't enough. And, the damage as well because of it.
I guess, what I haven't seen, and maybe Vanessa, you have an idea here, or Mouse had one and I didn't see it, is I don't see, like, other than just like simple stuff like make the turrets turn faster or decrease the reload a bit on the torpedoes, I don't know how I'd fix Haida to play better. Did you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see Haida become?
Well, some of the things I've been trying to research and look at is what were the different configurations of the guns and setups for these tribal class destroyers throughout the war. And you had several different refits. I know towards the end of the war, you had several tribals, in particular a couple Canadian-built tribals that had the 100 millimeter, not the bigger guns, but the smaller guns that were dual purpose, and in a 4x2 setup. So you could essentially see a AA destroyer, if you will, almost like a British Akatsuki and see that as a potential. Now, was Haida ever set up this way? I don't believe so. So I'd be hesitant to say, hey, let's set this up in an ahistorical way. Now, we might see other tribal destroyers with this, but for Haida in particular, I don't know. The turret traverse, yeah, you could boost that a little bit. I was using Jack Dunkirk, and I don't know, I might have had turret traverse, the expert marksman buff on there, so I might have been benefiting from that a little bit. But I feel maybe some unique way with the torpedoes reloading, maybe like really, really fast, or maybe if you made it single launch only, but each individual torpedo tube within the launcher reloaded at, whenever you launched it, it then reloaded like a turret instead of just all at once. And I don't know, like if you did that and maybe dropped it down to like 45 seconds or something, if that would, boost the torpedo potential a bit. I don't know. It's just really weird. I don't want to say, yeah, buff the range of the hydro and maybe increase the smoke. Cause that's going to really kind of power creep it and put it into an OP range. One thing for sure is when the smoke activation ends, the cooldown is a little long. I would like to see maybe that cooldown, go down just a bit. But yeah, this is going to be a tricky ship to kind of work on and not make overpowered. But because it's such a historical ship to so many people, it needs to be good. Like, you don't want to botch this one.
I do think that that's an important point. I mean, Haida is important to a lot of people. And you don't want it to be a bad ship. I don't think it needs to be an overpowered one, but somebody said it doesn't need to be overpowered. It just has to be good and fun to play. And I just don't think it's quite there yet. So I'm hoping that they take another pass at this one before we go on. Arun, did you have anything further to put on Haida before we move on to Salem?
Well, let's hope that what happened to Graf Zeppelin doesn't happen to her then.
Yeah,
No,
I definitely hope not.
Yeah, that would be really bad, and it would be bad for a lot of reasons because that happening once and the way that they responded and did stuff, that's okay. But if for that to happen again, that's not a good thing. So as we mentioned last week, Salem will be available in the Arsenal starting in patch 0.7.6 for Cole, which is going to be earnable without a clan and in non-competitive battle modes like co-op and random battles. She couples the Des Moines gunnery platform with a Minotaur-like super heal and a short-range 8.5 kilometer radar. She does lose the short-range Des Moines AA, but that's not really a big deal as most of the AA DPS is in the long, medium/long range, which is the same thing for Des Moines. But I guess, what place do you guys see Salem having in the Tier 10 beta?
I think it's going to be an excellent random battleship. Competitively, I don't know. It's really hard to say because it doesn't bring quite the strength that's expected from a Des Moines, and since you don't do that, I don't think that she's going to be nearly as instrumental for any competitive play as Des Moines is. On the other hand, in random battles, though, I think she's going to be excellent, especially since she has the same armor as the Des Moines. Well, I think so, at least. So this means that if you fight like Tirpitzes and stuff like that, you can actually bounce many of the AP shells instead of just getting overmatched like you do at Tier 10. And I absolutely loved that ship because the heal made it so that I was actually willing to go and fight close range against many, many, many things. Unlike, on the Des Moines, where I would like to mostly sit at long range.
Aside from radar in the shorter range, how would it be a bad thing with competitive? I mean, from a lot of the clan battles that I've kind of watched, I haven't been able to participate in any, but I mean, generally your Des Moines are sitting back just a little bit, not too far, but I mean, it's got the same guns, the same rate of fire, but now you have a super heal. So I don't see why there wouldn't be some people to look into it for a competitive aspect, especially with like King of the Sea.
I think you have a point. Some people are definitely going to take a look at it, but I think the problem is going to be in the radar, because often you'll notice when you play the ships and look at what the maps are like, often you'll have a situation where basically the Des Moines goes like behind an island, and then the radar range is like barely covers the entire cap zone, right? But if a Salem went there, there would be a part of the cap zone that would be out of range. And I think that in a competitive scenario, that could be a big problem for them. Of course, on some maps, it might very well be a very good strategy to have one, because it would just be a stronger version of the Des Moines, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually on with Arun on this one. I do think it's going to be more of a random battle type of thing, just because the reason that people take Des Moines isn't to get the DPS out of her. It's because her radar lasts a minute. And because her the 9.9 kilometer radar, it's just enough. Whereas like the Mossville radar doesn't last as long, but it is that super long range and catches destroyers off guard. So Salem is not going to be near as frightening to the enemy DDs as Des Moines is. So that said, Massachusetts has undergone yet another reimagining, with her secondary battery reload and accuracy buffed. This makes her secondary accuracy akin to Graf Zeppelin, a ship notorious for being able to kill unwary DDs. It also makes manual fire control for secondaries largely unnecessary, easing the commander skill requirements and making her more viable as a captain trainer. Combine all of this with less accurate 1.7 Sigma guns and a fast reloading heal, and you have a pretty interesting brawling battleship. I was actually pretty impressed with how this ship has turned out, as I was very skeptical that they could make an American brawling battleship work. But I did find that Massachusetts is fun to play. I just don't know that we needed an American brawling battleship.
I think it's fine. It gives variety. On the other hand, I don't think it has quite the same impact as why can't I remember the Alabama? Because if it's a brawling battleship, it's going to be completely different than what the other American battleships are like. So unless you want the Massachusetts precisely for brawling and want the special captain for her, rather than one that's shared across your American battleships, I feel like Alabama is a better choice, because Alabama works like the other American battleships. So you'll use the same skills, right?
Well,
right, but a lot of the skills. Sorry, Vanessa. A lot of the skills that you would take to make her a brawler, like AFT and or BFT and superintendent, those are skills that you take in an American battleship anyway, because you want to increase the range of the AA guns.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
So as long as she doesn't need manual fire control, then I think that she's way okay. Is that where you were at with it, Vanessa?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I took all my American battleship captains, which a lot of them have BFT, AFT, and just put them in Massachusetts and went away and had fun. And on the need for a U.S. brawling, battleship, this, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this was the opportunity for a USS Washington. And it kind of bugs me a bit that we're seeing this with Massachusetts. I'm having a lot of fun with USS Massachusetts, and it's been a good while since I've had fun with battleships in general, or even just USN battleships. And, it's funny, you brought up the 1.7 Sigma for it. I didn't even look at the Sigma value for Massachusetts, and I've just been having fun with it. I didn't think that the guns were that inaccurate. I know a lot of people have been complaining about it, but I didn't even realize that it was 1.7, and it hasn't been bothering me because I've still been landing some decent shots. Now, the long range, it's pretty short with the guns compared to the other, contemporary U.S. battleships at that tier or higher. So yeah, you've got the shorter range, but it means you can kind of be more stealthy. And, I think it's 12.4 was my detection range. So I was just kind of sneaking in, and the the secondaries, especially both sides going on when you can kind of angle, get in, and they are going to town on people. And was it 11.3? I think I maxed it to. And it's really funny to out secondary Bismarcks and Tirpitzes, and just watching people just squirm and go off in the chat. It's been a real joy and fun test with this ship.
Well, the shorter range doesn't really matter anyway, because the shells are so slow you don't want to fire too far away anyway. And
that's true.
That kind of covers the inaccuracy part as well, or the sigma, right? Because you fire at shorter ranges, so you don't notice it as much. The other thing is that even if you do fire at almost maximum range, what happens is that you often misjudge how you aim, so you blame yourself rather than the game. At least that's how I felt like.
I actually took the spotting aircraft, and that pushes it out to like 21, and it was able to let me get some shots in at the beginning of the game, and that's really the only time I really felt like I needed to have the longer range. The rest of the time I was taking shots at 10 to 13 kilometers, and at that range the 1.7 sigma just doesn't play a factor. I got plenty of citadels on Cleveland's and other things, so I thought that it was not overly punishing.
Just a fun ship, just a really fun ship to play.
Alrighty, well, we have the big topic for this week is legendary modules, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this, guys, because we have a lot of modules to cover. Basically every single tier 10 ship has a module, so we're going to try and break this up a bit into both into ship types and into individual ships. So they are a new idea, and they like I said, they're specific to tier 10 ships. They fit in either the 5th or the 6th module slot and give a unique changer buff to each tier 10. So we're going to cover them in groups, starting with carriers. The first off, Hakuryu gets enhanced flight control, which increases fighter hit points by 15% and all aircraft cruise speed by 5% in the 6th module slot. Midway gets reinforced armor protection for attack air groups, which increases attack aircraft hit points by 30% and decreases all aircraft cruise speed by 5% in the 6th module slot. Now, what I'm worried about here, Arun, is that they just went through a balance pass of both of these ships, and Hakuryu actually got additional fighters in her strike loadout to balance her against Midway, and now Midway is kind of on the downside of the fighter war with Hakuryu, and now they go and increase the fighter hit points for Hakuryu even farther, and the only thing that Midway gets is attack aircraft XP. I feel like they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to help Midway with her striking, but she still is going to be worse than Hakuryu.
Yep, I agree with that, and I think that's actually far worse. You see, the second part is the far more important thing. Minus 5% cruise speed for Midway and plus 5% for Hakuryu means that Hakuryu probably outcompetes Midway in almost everything at that point. Because remember, the 5% speed buff is what the current option is for the last upgrade slot that you can take instead of 15% attack aircraft HP, which means that this is basically, Hakuryu is basically getting that slot plus fighter HP. And the main problem is that in carrier gameplay, especially at higher tiers, what happens is that whoever lasts longer with fighters tends to end up winning the air battle. That doesn't mean that you're going to win the game. Of course, it's possible your team can lose the match before that happens, but the big problem is that whoever survives longer with the fighters will have a fairly large advantage. And as you mentioned, after the balance patch, they are at least somewhat close. And now this kind of a thing would definitely put Hakuryu ahead. And, you should always take the fighter HP in carrier play, because that just means that you can beat the opposing team's carrier. And the worst part is that I don't actually think that 30% attack aircraft HP for losing 5% speed is worth it. So I'm not even sure if the Midway upgrade itself is good. And I don't like the Hakuryu part because it's just objectively better than the other one.
I mean, I think that it is, because a lot of Midway players that I know take the 15% attack group HP one already and not the 5% speed because they're using tier 8 torpedo bombers. So, getting an additional 15% and bumping that up to 30%, particularly for the torpedo bombers, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but they're so slow. I mean, they're like really slow, the planes. I mean, compared to Hakuryu. Hakuryu is like 160 knots, right? While Midway torpedo bombers are, let me check, 136 knots. Now remember, subtract 6 from this. You're at 130 knots, whereas Hakuryu torpedo bombers themselves are at 164 knots. And fighters are at 180, and add 5% to that. Like, you'll have a lot of trouble outrunning almost anything.
Yeah, I do agree a bit there, Arun. It's going to be tough. I mean, yeah, your planes may last longer and be able to get the strike in, but the return trip, it's not like the IGN, particularly with the dive bombers, as soon as they drop their payload, they are zipping around the map and, can be used for scouts. I know Farazella talks about this a lot, and I don't know where Wargaming is going with it. Like, maybe they see numbers and things obviously that we don't see, but just on the feel aspect of these modules and how they balance, I agree. I don't think it's really helpful for the Midway.
I mean, this would have been what I would have this. I think this would have addressed the balance concern that they were thinking about before between Hakuryu and Midway. Like, before they added the third squadron, the third fighter squadron, this could have been the thing that bumped Hakuryu up just enough to equal her with Midway, rather than giving Hakuryu the third fighter squadron and this.
Well, there is one thing to consider. At least last time I checked, even with I'll check it right now. Even with never mind, I can't. Even with the third fighter squadron, your replacements aren't quite as much as you would expect. But I'm not quite certain about this. At least initially, it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, you do have, like, Midway still has a total number of fighters advantage on Hakuryu, but is it really going to get a chance to use it? That's again, I also don't think that we're good enough carrier players to be able to analyze that, but just looking at what it is from kind of my layman's perspective, I really just don't feel like this was a fair way to balance these two modules.
I would honestly prefer these upgrades to be, by the way, they're called upgrades. I would prefer these upgrades to be more like the Midways, where you have like a trade-off, right? But I don't think 30% HP for 5% speed is quite good enough for that slot, because you could get just 15% HP normally without losing anything. I think that maybe you would like to go like 50% or 45% attack aircraft HP for 5% HP. And I think something similar should be done to the Hakuryu, where it's like a trade-off, where it's not automatically, this is better, so I'm going to take this upgrade.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one as well. So a lot of these are like trade-offs, and the Hakuryu one just doesn't feel like a trade-off at all. Like, it just feels like you are better, period. Here, have fun. And I just, that's one of the reasons why I just don't think it feels fair. So for destroyers, we're going to talk about 3 of them to start with here. Shimakaze gets accelerated torpedo tubes reloading, which increases torp reload by 25% at the expense of torp tube traverse, which is 80% slower, and increased torpedo incapacitation chance 50%. This goes in the 6 module slot and is in place of the torp tube modification 3, which gives a 15% reload buff and the 15% torp incapacitation chance. With fully reload upgrades and captain skills, this makes Shima clock in with a 103.3 second torp reload, which is actually pretty darn fast. And I did feel like it was an interesting way to play Shima. Now, the torp tube traverse nerf is a much bigger deal than I thought it was going to be, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about gearing real quick. Gearing gets modified hull, which reduces detectability by 15% and and dispersion of enemy shells is increased by 5%. This comes at the expense of a 15% increase to main battery reload and a 5% increase in torp reload. The module goes in the 5th slot in place of what you would normally take the concealment mod. Finally, Khabarovsk gets weighted artillery, which increases main battery range by 8% and reload by 6% at the expense of 13% reduction in gun traverse. This module also goes in the 5th slot instead of concealment. So these first 3 destroyers, you've got Shimakaze, which is just getting a straight buff on torp reload and just giving her more offensive capability. You have Gearing, which is like getting a crazy defensive buff. And then Khabarovsk, which is just getting an annoying ass. Let's make Khabarovsk more annoying than it already was buff. So why? I guess I didn't see any of these, except with the possible exception of the Shimakaze change. I didn't see the need for any of these to be in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of people know my hatred for the Khabarovsk, so no real comment there. The Gearing, that one is going to be interesting. I have not been able to test any of these modules, by the way, but Gearing...
Upgrades. They're called upgrades.
Upgrade complete. Yeah, that one I will need to test a bit more. And Gearing is also getting some other changes that are going to be interesting. Now, Shima, for the most part, you kind of plan like your battleship or something with a slower traverse weapon system. You kind of plan for, all right, where is the enemy going to be, and kind of already point those weapon systems towards that area. So I feel like Shim is going to be like that anyway, because you're the advanced scout. You have an idea where they're going to be. You're going to line up, the 3 sets of launchers in your guns, and you're just going to kind of be ready and laying out spreads of torpedoes. So yeah, this is going to be really nasty. What did you say the reload was? Down to a minute and
41 or something around that.
Yeah,
a minute and 41.
Yeah, for 3 launchers,
it's 103 seconds. So
yeah, wow. I mean, if you stagger those launches just a little, that's a lot of torpedoes going through the water. So that's going to be interesting. I know you're going to see those people who take the 20 kilometers, but for me, I use the suicide 8-kilometer ones because I love just trolling people with them. That's going to be interesting. I'm definitely going to want to test this and try it.
So, Arun, one of the things that that I was talking about with some people with is that this change to Gearing makes it so that it's basically essential to take this module for competitive, because it actually changes the detectability of Gearing to 5.6 kilometers, which is the same as Shimakaze, which just got buffed to make it better than the other destroyers because it was having a hard time. And now all of a sudden Gearing is going to be the same again. I don't get it.
That's actually exactly what I wanted to mention as well. That Shimakaze was just buffed in concealment, and now Gearing gets this thing that makes it completely irrelevant. I don't think Gearing needs this kind of a concealment buff because, sure, you lose, firepower in terms of guns and torpedoes, but I don't think that's what this. Like, Gearing is still going to be a scary Gearing, right? You'll still have that really annoying armor plate in the middle as a destroyer, which makes you fairly powerful against another destroyer if you're fighting. But the main thing is that you'll still be Gearing, right? You don't really lose anything, except you're just better at, spotting other destroyers and capping. I'll be honest, though, I think I really like the upgrade on the Shimakaze. I think the minus 80% on the turret traverse or torpedo tube traverse is actually a very, very big deal, just as you mentioned, because I think that it changes the way you play them. I wouldn't recommend it with the 8-kilometer torpedoes because it's very hard to do like reactionary torpedoes with them because, hey, a ship just appeared. I need to really quickly turn and fire my torpedoes. Oh, wait, my torpedo launchers take 15 years to actually turn. And I would say that these are more for the 20-kilometer guys maybe not 20, the 12-kilometer guys at least, that sit back and, try to hit the battleships there. They plan ahead on when they fire, etc., and they don't get into like a close range fight where they need to do something quickly. I think it'll actually cause quite a lot of annoyance, and I like the trade-off in it. I don't like the gearing one because, again, I also agree that it's basically going to be essential, and I don't think the Khabarovsk one is actually good. Sure, it gives you more range and faster reload. The turret traversal reduction doesn't matter. The problem is that it's in the same slot as the concealment upgrade, but nobody takes that on a Khabarovsk. What you instead take is the steering gears upgrade, because Khabarovsk has like 11-second rudder shift. And if you take both of the steering gears upgrades, you get it down to like 4.5 or 5 seconds, which means that you can dodge a lot. And I don't think the increase in range actually makes up for the loss in the rudder shift time. And because of that, I wouldn't recommend it at all. And so I like these three, actually, except the Khabarovsk one, which is really weird to me. It just doesn't feel good enough.
I mean, maybe that's the trade-off they're going for. It isn't so much the traverses that you lose the rudder shift, and that's the trade-off that you're having to make to take the increased range and reload. But I mean, the problem with Kavaros has always been her guns. Like, her guns are annoying, and they do set a lot of fires, and you're just enhancing the annoying aspect of Khabarovsk. I don't think that ship needed help.
Yeah, but if she can't turn as quickly, then, you can actually hit her, which is really, really hard if she turns really quickly. If her rudder shift is really quick, that is.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, you're getting more offensive capability at the expense of defensive ones. I mean, it is a trade-off in that sense. I don't know that I don't know how it's going to play out when you have a bunch of them on, 2 or 3 of them on the enemy team trying to do that long range, I'm a cruiser without a citadel thing.
I actually ended up fighting a Kiev while playing this. We were both at like 14 kilometer range and fired up on each other. Both had speed boost and stuff. Yeah, we didn't really hit one another very well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things where honestly, I feel like Khabarovsk, the most dangerous thing to shoot at them is battleships, because the Khabarovsk with that 50 millimeter plate, it arms the battleship shells, and they take full damage from battleship shells a lot of the time. So, that's not, and you're right. If they can't turn away, then they're going to take those, especially things like Montana's, just wrecking them from 15, 16 kilometers.
Yeah, but battleships are for shooting down cruisers, right? So. That's exactly, they're fulfilling their role.
So we got 3 other destroyers, and so let's talk about their upgrades. Thank you, Aaron. Real quick, Grozovoy gets recoilless main battery guns, which increase main battery reload by 18% at the expense of 7% increase in traverse time and 10% increase in reload time for torps. This module again is in the 6th slot. As I understood Grozovoy to play, it's supposed to be a torpedo boat, not a gunboat. So this is another one that I don't understand what this one's trying to do to Grozovoy, because you have to give up the 15% torp reload module upgrade, to take this. Then you've got Z-52, which gets low profile torpedo tubes, which decreases ship detectability by 5%. And torp reload by 10%. This module is in the 5th slot, so it's at the expense of the concealment module, which is normally decreasing ship detectability by 10%. Yu Yang gets enhanced armaments, which decreases main battery reload and torpedo reload time by 10% at the expense of smoke generator dispersion and radar action time, both of which are decreased by 30%. This module goes in the 5th module slot, and again, you have to give up concealment to take it. This Yu Yang one to me is interesting because it really is a big trade-off. It's the Yu Yang radar is already very short. You have to give up your concealment, and you have to give up, your smokescreen dispersion time. So that's how long your smoke lasts, by the way, in the parlance of World of Warships. The activation time is how long the module is active. So these ones, I didn't get, like, Vanessa, I guess you would be you probably were looking at the Z-52 one the closest, right?
Yeah, and I'm still trying to, decide really, what on that, because I mean, I try and get my concealment down as much as possible, especially on German destroyers, because the idea is you want to get people into the trap set the smoke, get them with your sonar, and then just, have fun and sink them. I don't know. It's Z-52. It is one of my favorite destroyers, but it definitely is hard, especially in the tier 10 meta, where as soon as a destroyer is spotted, a lot of times people are, focusing them down. So I don't know. The Yu Yang also, that's going to be tricky. That's really difficult to play when trying to, do radar. I enjoy doing a radar destroyer, but it takes a very different mindset. So I don't know. I really need to test these modules and see if it's worth the trade-off. Personally, just kind of looking at it and reading it, I don't feel that they are. But I don't know. I need to test them.
When I got access to it and I noticed what the Z-52 upgrade was, I actually laughed out loud in real life because I was like, what the hell is this? Why would anyone ever want to take this? Hey, I'm a real destroyer. I have the worst concealment out of all the actual destroyers in the game at tier 10, and let's make it worse. Why? Like, why would you ever take something like that? You would have to put something really, really, really massive on the upgrade to make it worth it. Like, I don't know, 30% torpedo reload time, or maybe like 20 or 25, because this just doesn't feel worth it at all. I mean, you just make your concealment worse, and concealment is the lifeblood of destroyers. Like, you live and die by that. And the same goes for the Yu Yang. It doesn't matter that your guns reload 10% faster or torpedoes reload 10% faster. Why would I take that? Maybe if it was on the what's the destroyer before the Yu Yang?
Chunmoo.
Yes, if it were on the Chunmoo, sure. In that case, I would like that because I really like putting a lot of torpedo reload reduction on that ship, because the torpedoes are kind of like a mini Asashia, except you can hit cruisers too, and or actually a better version of the Asashia, I suppose. And
so, but to give you an idea here, Arun, it takes it down to 62 seconds reload on Z-52's torpedoes. If you take the module, the legendary upgrade, the upgrade from the 6th slot, and you take the captain skill, and it puts her detectability at 6.4 kilometers.
Yeah, but I mean, look, gearing is going to be 5.6. You're going to be 800 meters, and like Vanessa said, it's the Z-52 still wants to take advantage of the trap with the hydro, right? And the higher, the bigger the difference between your hydro range and the concealment, basically the harder it gets. Maybe, if they gave her like hydro ship detectability, maybe then it would be worth it. But I don't know. Right now, I definitely don't think so. And Grozovoi just feels like, hey, nobody cares about this ship. Let's put whatever on it.
I mean, the other thing about Z-52 is that you're giving up the detectability for a 6-second decrease. And I mean, it doesn't feel. I'm with you, Arun. It just doesn't feel.
The torpedo reload is already naturally quick on that ship, and I mean, the torpedoes don't do crazy good damage, but if you stagger it or just, are able to, set up flooding dots with it, that's where you get your damage. And I could see where they're trying to go with it, but until they give all destroyers a healing ability, I don't think it's ever worth it to trade off concealment. Concealment is so important for destroyers. And I just, no, I mean, I'll test it. And maybe if you could want to sit there and try and spam torpedoes from a distance, but that's not every destroyer needs to be like the IJN line and be stealthy and torpy. I mean, you got to have some destroyers out there that actually go in, fight, try and out-detect the other destroyers, or just get into a brawl.
Oh yeah, speaking of the Yu Yang, the smoke reduction, I mean the radar as well, the smoke duration, the reduction, like why would you want that? Because the smoke is like the coolest thing about the Pan-Asian destroyers, because it's so insanely powerful. And if you reduce it, then you kind of lose the edge, right? Because you can almost like not quite perma smoke, but you can almost do that. And if you reduce any of that, you can't do that anymore. And I feel like that's just throwing away one of the unique things about the ship.
Yeah, it does seem homogenizing as well. Well, we have a bunch of cruisers and battleships to talk about, so let's get on to that. So for cruisers, Zhao gets enhanced main battery and steering gears, which decreases maximum dispersion for the main battery by 7%, increases range by 8%, and decreases rudder shift by 20%. This goes in the 6th module slot and will be a change for most people on Zhao will take the range upgrade. So the range upgrade in that slot, I believe, is 16%. I'm going to just check this real quick.
I believe you're right. 16.
Yep, it is.
Okay, 16%. So you're losing 8% of range to get some to an accuracy buff and a rudder shift buff. So it's kind of like putting several different things together, a jack of all trades kind of thing.
Because Zhao really, really needed accuracy.
Right?
I was going to say that.
Des Moines gets enhanced propulsion, which reduces rudder shift time by 20%, decreases time to reach full power by 50% at the expense of radar action time decreased by 10%. The module goes in the 6th slot, and again, you have to give up range to take this upgrade. Worcester gets enhanced countermeasures, which increases action time of hydro and defensive fire by 20% and radar by 10%. This module goes in the 5th module slot, and you must sacrifice concealment to take it. Of these 3 upgrades, the Des Moines one is one that I played around with, and it is just weird. It's like, okay, now my Des Moines is a destroyer. The other ones, the Zhao one, I kind of get they're trying to give Zhao a buff, but why not just give Zhao 5,000 more hit points and be done with it, which is what it really needs. And the Worcester one, I don't know why you would take anything that would increase your concealment in Worcester, or decrease your concealment in Worcester, because it lives and dies by its concealment.
Yeah, but with Worcester, I could actually potentially see a use for it, because the action time increasing that literally would put radar over a minute, because right now it's
61.6.
Yeah, because it's 56 normally with just the standard radar upgrade. So that is crazy. And you got to remember that Worcester is a really amazing support ship. So for people like me, if you are kind of trying to put the ship into a position where you can really do amazing support roles, that could be a good potential there. I would entertain taking that module, especially if you're playing with other people. Maybe you have a Minotaur in the division if you're wanting to be super troll, or if you're just running with like a Gehring or someone that hey, I need your smoke, good long smoke, and just go to town. There's a lot of potential there. Des Moines, that is very interesting, but a lot of Des Moines players kind of find an island, hug that island, and they don't really take off or maneuver or things like that.
On the Des Moines one, Vanessa, it's better than you think, because what you can do is be exposed, fire your shots from just past an island, and then wait till the shots are fired back at you and move and not be in place fast enough that their shots all miss.
So basically, it's
that
Henri.
good.
It's
like a
Henri.
Minotaur. It's like a Minotaur, but with actual armor.
Yeah, that's exactly what it makes it. It makes it like Minotaur.
Oh, I'm thinking, Henri, when it just kind of sits there and then all of a sudden uses your speed boost and then, gets moving and scooting and makes it really hard to hit. But yeah, Minotaur with its increased acceleration. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I want to see it in action.
I like the Des Moines one. If they give the same to the Salem, I'll be over the moon. Although I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't really feel either way on the Worcester. I think the 5 or 6 seconds on the radar and a little bit on the other durations isn't really worth the concealment. On the other hand, I like the Zhao upgrade because you choose whether you want slightly more range or you want to deal with the other stuff. But I agree with what you said. The Zhao used to have 44 4,000 something HP, and they nerfed it at some point. So they might want to change it back to that. But maybe that would be signaling that, hey, maybe we made a mistake.
Well, we've got 4 more cruisers. Moskva gets weighted main battery guns, which decreases dispersion by 11%, increases range by 8%, and increases main battery traverse time by 13%. This module goes in the 5th slot and again is in place of concealment, which I actually think this is an interesting one and is one that Moskva players will kind of want to take.
I don't think
Hindenburg
it's
on the other
at all. I mean, it's literally more accurate than more range, neither of which Moskva needs.
Hindenburg gets enhanced repair party, which decreases the main battery repair and fire extinguishing time by 50%, flooding recovery by 70%, and rudder shift by 20%. This goes in the 5th module slot again and is in place of concealment. Minotaur gets enhanced smoke generator, which decreases detectability by 5%, increases dispersion of the enemy by 10%, and increases the action time of your smoke generator by 150%, but your smoke dissipates faster by 15%. This module, again, goes in the 5th module slot, and you are decreasing your detectability thing from, I believe, 12% to 5%. Finally, Henry IV gets increased firing elevation of artillery, which increases main battery range by 8%, lowers reload by 12%, and increases detectability by 10%. This is a pretty big nerf because not only are you losing them because it goes in the 5th module slot, not only are you losing the 10 or 12% concealment that you would get from taking the concealment module, you're actually increasing it by 10%. So literally you're going to be spotted from everywhere on the map, which is an interesting choice. But what do you guys think about these ones?
It's okay. You'll be at like 20 kilometers anyway, and nobody can hit you because you're going at the speed of light.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. I can see why they put that in there because a lot of Henri players, kind of flank anyway. So, it just kind of ensures that, when they're out there flanking, they can't really engage their Romulan cloaking device and kind of sneak away. The other ones, Moskva, every time I think about Moskva and any type of buff or things about its guns, all I can think about is Euro's video in his comparison about Russian cruisers don't know the definition of balance with the guns because they get all of the buffs. So yeah, I mean, okay, traverse speed. You play it like kind of a battleship anyway, and I don't know if we're going to talk about the Stalingrads that we've been testing, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's a massive Russian cruiser with amazing guns that are practically rail guns and, can hit you anywhere on the map.
I actually think the accuracy thing is interesting. If the game keeps going in the same direction for like a few more years, will it get to a point where the Moskva is so accurate that RNG makes you never miss? It's just you that's at fault for missing because the shells always go exactly where you point them.
Well, I mean, you go look at the aiming systems modification 0 for Yubari, Arun, and the only person that you can blame for missing is yourself because your shells go exactly where you point them.
Yeah, I don't think Moskva really needs that upgrade. On the other hand, losing the concealment upgrade doesn't make any difference either because you have such bad concealment anyway. Although I guess in that sense you might want more of it. But I think the interesting portion is actually Hindenburg. It's like Wargaming went, hey, you know what, guys? Hindenburg actually is a battleship. This is why we're giving her, things that a battleship would love to have. Except the main battery repair time. That one's kind of weird. But like fire extinguishing
70%? 70% flooding recovery is ridiculous.
Exactly.
And 50% fire?
Yeah, it's like, hey, I got hit by a torpedo. But I don't think on a cruiser, it doesn't matter, right? Because the torpedo alpha damage is so high, you don't want to get hit anyway. The flooding ticks themselves don't really matter, right? It's the torpedo itself. And I feel that upgrade is just really meh.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, in some ways, I feel like the Hindenburg one is amazing. And in some ways, I feel like why would I take that? Because again, one of the big problems about Hindenburg already is that you have a hard time running away from people and going dark. And this is just going to be on top of that. So for battleships, Yamato gets enhanced main battery guns, which again decreases the dispersion of main battery shells by 7%, lowers the reload by 12%, and increases traverse time by 19%. This goes in the 6th module slot and replaces for a lot of us the reload by 12% upgrade, and the which also increases the traverse time by 13%. So basically, you're increasing your traverse time by an additional 6% to get a 7% main battery dispersion buff. So we'll talk about that trade-off in a minute. Montana gets enhanced damage control system, which decreases the fire extinguishing and flooding by 10%, rudder shift time by 30%, and steering gear repair time by 70%. This again goes in the 5th module slot in place of concealment. Kurfürst gets enhanced main armaments, which decreases main battery reload by 15%, secondary reload by 10%, at the expense of decreasing main battery range by 8% and traverse speed by 7%. This goes in the 6th upgrade slot. So these ones are interesting to me, and the Yamato one is one that it's really hard sometimes to notice if it's working or not. Like I got a lot of times where I would get four hits on a bow on target, and that's kind of better than I'm used to. But there are other times it didn't quite work out that well, and I will tell you that you get used to the 13% increased traverse time on Yamato guns and having them have that 62 second. Having that go up to 68 seconds is brutal, and it's just enough that I don't know that it's worth it. The Montana one, it doesn't feel like it's a big enough buff to give up concealment, and the Kurfürst one, I mean, it helps. I feel like that just makes Kurfürst a little better. Like the trade-offs for Kurfürst are just not a big deal.
I would like to make a joke about Yamato's upgrade being that, hey, we welded the turrets to the hull of the ship, but we made them super accurate. But actually, that's not the case. I agree with you that the worst turret traverse isn't that great. And I also agree that you can't really notice the 7% reduction, because if you want to see it, like an action yourself, you can just take the minus 7% dispersion upgrade in the one of the slots instead of anti-air range, and just compare it, and you won't notice it. It's not like it might be something if you keep like track of statistics, you might notice it then, but not in game, because you still get these bad shots, you still get great shots with or without this. So I don't think that makes much of a difference.
Yeah, I think you're right. You'd have to play, 1,000 games and then, catalog your results over those set games to really notice the difference. And I mean, Yamato is already like super accurate, and it's kind of like Moskva. Does it really need to be more accurate?
Yes.
But again, it's like the negative is felt constantly, but the positive, I just don't see it enough for it to be worth it. Like that's my problem with the Montana one. So moving on, Conqueror gets enhanced engineering systems, which increases main battery traverse speed by 13% and decreases rudder shift by 40%, as well as steering gear repair time by 80%. This goes in the 5th upgrade slot. And Republic gets the additional loader for main battery guns, which decreases reload time by 18% at the expense of reducing range by 16% and traverse speed by 19%. This goes again in the 6th upgrade slot. So this is one, like a lot of Republic players take the main battery reload already, which it decreases reload time by I believe it's 12%. So you're getting 6% more at the expense of 16% of your range and 6% traverse speed. The Conqueror one, I don't know if they're like trying to make Conqueror even more of a cruiser. I guess my general question about all these modules, as we kind of come to the end of the list here, is why make them upgrades? Why make them module upgrades, whatever you want to call them? Why make them that? Why not just tweak the ships the way you want to tweak them? Exactly.
To me, a lot of this strikes as balance changes or balance, but why not just make the change to the ship to begin with and balance it? Because most of these upgrade options, like, I mean, I'll try, but I don't feel it's any better than the other options that we have. Now, I know this is a work in progress, but are the other ones going away? Are we going to lose the standard upgrades that we've been used to? And like, this is going to be the option and maybe some of the others? Or, I mean, do we know more about that? Or it's just, hey, these are legendary upgrades and, you know, they're in addition to all the other stuff that you have.
I don't know about that, but I do want to say that the Republic upgrade is actually quite really, really interesting. I mean, look, you get faster main battery reload and you lose range. Like, who wants to give up range on the Republic, right? Why would you ever want to do such a thing? Because I think the ship really needs more range instead of less.
It's got to compete with Yamato in that field.
I mean, it already does. Not,
I mean, 26 kilometers has already got. It's like, why even bother to nerf it? I mean, like, you're not even going to
exactly. It makes absolutely no difference, like zero difference, because you basically never fire that far away. Just you have 8 guns. Even if you manage to get within the same zip code as the target, you'll hit like 1 shell at best. Okay, maybe 2, but still, it doesn't really it makes no difference. The Conqueror one is. Yeah, honestly, it does feel like, hey, guys, look, we just wanted to make the Conqueror... We just wanted to make the Conqueror better in combat. But on the other hand, I do think the Conqueror one actually is like a trade-off because it's in the same slot as the Concealment, and Conqueror is really, really good at Concealment. In fact, I don't think the Conqueror should even have the Concealment upgrade because it gets that good with Concealment for a battleship. And I agree. I also think that many of these legendary upgrades are just straight up better than any of the alternatives, and I agree that in that case it's just like a balance change rather than having a choice. I think they should just, I don't know, keep the ones that actually give you like a real choice and are meaningful, like maybe the Shimakazu one, and just do away with the rest of them and maybe eventually come back with all of them. I don't even think that they should try to release all of these at once anyway, because people just won't quite get all of them, and it'll just cause confusion.
One of the big things is that we don't know how they're going to be earnable. We've already been told that they won't be coming out of super containers. So I don't know if they're going to be purchasable in the arsenal. And if they are going to be purchasable in the arsenal, is it going to be for coal or is it going to be for steel? We don't know if they're going to be like missions or something like that. I mean, I guess these aren't good enough that I feel like they should come out of the arsenal, if that makes sense. And they certainly aren't good enough to come out of the arsenal with requiring steel, which requires you to play competitive mode.
Maybe it'll be a solution for those people who have too many credits. Like they'll cost like 100 million or something.
I mean, that's possible.
That price.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, is that it wouldn't be worth it.
I mean, I would. Once you have all the ships, what the hell are you doing with your credits anyway?
Well, I mean, yes, but I don't feel most, 85, 90% of these modules are actually worth it. I just don't. I mean, I would definitely need to test them and see if the change in gameplay and play style is something that I would actually take to. But in the current meta of things, none of these modules really interest me.
I feel like there are like 3 or 4 that actually interest me, and the rest are just kind of like, why?
Yeah,
is where I'm at with them.
I feel exactly the same way. It's just a few that are really interesting, and the rest are either just, in my opinion, bad or objectively just better. So there's absolutely no decision whether you should or shouldn't take it.
Yeah. So we have one quick final topic, and it actually ties into the changes with Tier 10 ships, because we've got some upcoming changes for Gearing and Zao. Specifically, Zao is going to get the option to mount 12-kilometer torps from Yugumo and Shimakaze, and Gearing will get access to the 10.5-kilometer torps from Fletcher. Now, these are some pretty big changes for well-established ships, but were they needed? And how do they fit in with the modules that we just talked about?
Why? Especially the Gearing one. Why? Please don't do that, especially with this new upgrade thing. It'll just make... the Fletcher torpedoes are just better than the Gearing ones because they have a much faster reload, and I believe the torpedoes are also faster and they have less concealment or better concealment too. It's like you want to have the Fletcher torpedoes. People play the Fletcher and the Changmu over the Gearing and the Yueyang because the torpedoes are better. And if the Fletcher gets the option, maybe Yueyang will eventually as well. And I don't think those ships need it. They're already strong enough. And I feel the same way about the Zhao. And 12 kilometers for that cruiser, that's going to be scary, actually.
I'm looking forward to it, as Zhao was my first tier 10, and I loved IGN cruiser torpedoes. So this is going to be really fun to sit there and stealth torp with this cruiser and stealth torp well. Now, it's going to suck to lose a bit of the speed, but that's I'll take that trade-off. With Gearing, it actually, this I'm also looking forward to, because the Fletcher is one of my favorite ships in the game. And to have those faster reloading torpedoes, even though you're giving up a ton of range, it's good. You're going to be able to spam torpedoes more. And the only thing that you're going to kind of give up is the agility and nimbleness of the Fletcher, but you get better firepower. And then if you couple it with the module, and that might be the one legendary upgrade that I do kind of like, because 5.6 on a Gearing, and then you throw in the new torpedoes, it's going to make Gearing pretty popular in my opinion, at least for me.
I really hope that if they go through with this, they do the same on the Changmu and Yueyang, especially with the new upgrade as well, so I can launch even more of those really annoying torpedoes.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's more like, I agree that both of these changes make these ships better, but did they need to be better is where I'm at. And I don't see that they needed to be better in this way.
I don't think so either.
For IGN cruisers, it is you literally, from tier 6 up, the standard 203 heavy cruiser, your torpedoes have a range of 10 kilometers. And then you have this weird, jump from Ibuki that, you have amazing torpedoes on Ibuki. And then all of a sudden you lose 2 kilometers. And it's like, well, you almost never use these torpedoes anymore with Zhao. So you have this gameplay divergence that is the same all the way up to the pinnacle at tier 10. And now all of a sudden you don't have the ability to stealth torpedo anymore. And you're losing that weapon system and gameplay aspect that you've learned all the way from tier 6 up. And now that's changing and morphing into something completely different at tier 10. Now, I don't want to say completely different, but just it's different than what you have been progressing up to. Gearing the same way, you have shorter range torpedoes on US and destroyers as you go up the line, and you kind of get to this, I don't want to say pinnacle, but this sweet spot, if you will, with the Fletcher. And things are amazing and great. And then you get to tier 10 and it is almost fundamentally different than what you had been working up to. You have torpedoes that have insane range and you have a slow reload on them, but they have insane range and your guns are amazing. You're not as nimble or agile as the other destroyers. So the gameplay, again, is kind of different than what you've been working up towards. So these changes, I feel, make these two ships particularly fall in line to what you have been working your way up to.
I guess, Arun, is that...
I agree.
Do you think that that's a good enough... I agree she's right.
Yes.
But is it a good enough reason?
I don't know. I agree with you. I don't think the ships needed these buffs either. Although I will definitely like it when I can just play the Gearing instead of the Fletcher. But I agree. I don't think these ships needed buffs. I think they were doing really well already. I really enjoyed Zawa in ranked, and this would just make her better. Although there is one thing that the 12-kilometer torpedoes will give her. They will give her a different opportunity or different way to play, because unlike the 10-kilometer torpedoes, you can actually go legitimately stealth torpedo. So if you drop like low life or something like that, or low HP, and you are in a ranked battle, and it's late into the match, and you're low HP, and there's like a battleship, you might actually go and stealth torpedo that one like you would as a destroyer, instead of doing all the things where you go at maximum range and then just hope that he doesn't hit you. So that could be somewhat interesting.
The destroyers, when they're low health, they go in and gun targets in ranked battles. I mean, why would you stay out of range and stay alive if you have low health in a destroyer in ranked battles? I don't understand.
I mean...
Yeah, let's not bring up ranked. I'm sure we'll talk about that in another episode.
I ranked out.
Oh, congratulations.
Sunday morning, I had 16 hours to spare, but I ranked out. I was happy.
I wish I could say the same.
I was quite happy with my ranking out as well. The last day, I think I lost like one battle out of like 7 or 8 matches.
Nice. Yeah, I got to the night before on Saturday night. When actually Kami had gotten here, and he and I were sitting there together, and I had 2 stars that I needed to get to rank out, and I got to rank 2 and 4 stars, and then lost 3 battles in a row. I was so mad. But then the next morning I woke up and ranked out. But I did it in 155 games, and I actually have a couple of statistics I wanted to share with you guys about what I did ranking out. And I'm trying to do some research into the potentially looking at ranked as a whole and how many things take you to rank out. So there are 40 stars between rank 10 and rank 1. I played 127 games between rank 10 and rank 1, so 127 games at tier 10, which means that I needed 3.175 stars, 3.175 games per star, and 1.825 wins per star. And I'm kind of curious if you guys think that is a good ratio or not. And I was kind of in the middle of the pack. I think I was like 208 or something like that out of 560 people on NA that got rank 1 this season. On the other end, the person that got it with the most games played, I believe, 1,300 ranked games to get to rank out. So what is a good ratio, do you guys think?
Well, I think it depends. Like, I don't remember if I mentioned it last time, but I think ranked should be somewhat longer, because right now if you get lucky, you'll rank out really, really, really quickly. And if you get unlucky, it takes a long time to rank out. Because you mentioned the ratio, right? But consider this, right? If you let's say you have a 60% win rate, and you don't ever get number 1 on a loss, so you always lose a star when you lose. This means that if you play 10 games, you win 6 stars and you lose 4 stars, which means that you gain 2 stars in 10 battles. This would put the ratio at 5, right? 5 games per star. And I feel that I just lost my train of thought. Wow.
Well, I mean, to keep in mind, I had a 55 or 57% win rate.
Oh, well.
So
yeah, but that depends.
That gives you an idea.
If you can keep your star, you don't have to get it back again. And oh yeah, right. I was talking about it takes the variance is really big. So if you get like two matches where you have like an AFK person or somebody that's trolling, or that's basically going to cause you guys to lose, maybe they're like a team killer or something. I actually had one of these. If you get these people and you lose the games because of that, it takes a long time to actually get back there. So the amount of games you rank out in, like the people you hear that ranked out in like 90 games or something, that just means they didn't get any of these people, or these unfortunate circumstances, or they were able to still win. And I think that because ranked is so short, you see this massive variance as a result of that. Although I suppose if ranked required more stars, you would still see the same. I just think that we need to...
Well, keep in mind that one guy on NA played 1,200 ranked games.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean...
He ended the season ranked 10 and 0 stars, and the highest he got was ranked 7.
Well, I mean, like, for people like him, ranked actually makes a lot of sense because ranked puts him at some level where he can't progress any further, right? Like, that is where he's supposed to be. But for everybody that manages to rank out like below like 200 games, 300 games, it doesn't really tell you how good they are. It just tells them that they're better than the system overall, right? Although, you know, because people get out, you don't know how you place against those people that got out before you. I personally, I think it took me like 147 games to rank out this season. I didn't feel that it went that well, but I had like a 60% win rate. So I guess I
had 155 games to rank out, and I had a 57% win rate. Looking back on it, I don't feel those numbers were terrible, but at every point during the season, I felt awful playing ranked.
I felt the exact opposite. It felt great to me.
Yeah, this was one of the worst seasons that I've ever participated in. And just to kind of compare last season to this season, last season I think I ranked out in 82 or 86 games, but...
That's because of Low Yang.
Well, that's where I'm getting with this. So you have ships that in some cases are blatantly overpowered. And then if you put someone in that ship that can use that ship to its maximum, then you are going to see the results of that. And, you know, starting out the season, you know, with the tier 8 part, I won every single game in the Low Yang, to get to the tier 10 bracket. And not only was it like, yeah, I won every single game, like every single game was 2K plus XP, like over the top, like it was a landslide win. And last season, you know, that wasn't every game, but it was a lot of games like that. So, I mean, there are factors of it where ships do play a very important role in the shape up of that season. And for me, there were so many matches as a destroyer player where you saw the Des Moines and the Radar Minotaurs go, you know where they were going to camp. They were able to hold or, you know, overwatch the objective. And it was extremely painful to try and play the objective this season as a destroyer player. And it just killed it for me. I absolutely hated this season. And if there's another tier 10 ranked season and they do not address radar or do something like, I don't even want to play it. I do not want to play ranked anymore. If this is going to be the future, like I'm done.
I'll be honest. What you mentioned, I think this is something the player base, and well, me included, do like make a mistake in the way we play the game. You see, we approach the game as though it's mostly the same. You see, if we play a destroyer, we know more or less what the enemy is going to do based on the map because there is a meta that's going on, right? And if you think about it, it's possible to do things differently. And the opposing team doesn't always know that. And you can catch them off guard and do other things. But the thing is that you need to actually try that. And most players will never try something like that. And I think that it's completely possible that it might be doable for destroyers to deal with the radar situation. Like maybe you have like a map like North, and you have a ship that goes around instead and torpedoes the opposing team from behind and, you know, spots all of them and all of the good things you would want the destroyer to do. But you don't really get that in a decent player. The only players that go somewhere there are people who basically get lost and don't know better, right? But I think a good player could choose to play differently based on the meta. For example, another example, as a battleship, what often happened is that on maps like Warrior's Path, you would get these battleship blobs that would more or less sit behind I think it was the A-cap on both sides, and then they would shell each other, more or less. But you could also take a battleship to go into the middle, and then you would have a better angle to shoot at the other battleships, and this could give you a sizable advantage. It could also open up the game because the opposing team doesn't expect something like that. And I think all of these kinds of things are possible. Now, they're not really doable at the start of a season because nobody knows this kind of a meta. Nobody knows like how these maps are specifically going to more or less be played, right? No, like they'll have an idea, hey, I want to go there, but you don't know where the other battleships are usually going to go. But at the end of the season, this is more cemented, I would say, because you see the people doing the same things over and over, and you can take advantage of that. And I think players in this game often don't do that. And I think this is, well, our fault.
Well, yeah, I can definitely see a lot of that potential in theory. In practice, and just the sheer toxicity of ranked. And the moment you see that destroyer try and go around, even if they're successful or not, the team screams bloody murder, that they are not being a team player. Even if, they might be able to spot. The problem is you're out of position. If you got to come back and respond to something, if all of a sudden you need that destroyer because the other destroyer dies, the toxicity level just goes skyrockets. And there is a clear objective to play. There is a clear objective of you can't sacrifice your HP, or you got to save as much HP as possible. There's too many factors into it. And there's a reason why the meta becomes the meta. And if you try and buck the meta, your team is just going to scream bloody murder at you. And that's not really something that there's been so many matches where I see people fighting, even when we're winning, people are fighting and biting each other's heads off. And it's like, people chill. We're winning. Stop fighting. Just keep shooting. Just do whatever it takes to get the W. And I don't know. It's good in theory, Arun, but in practice and what we experience in ranked is completely different.
Yeah, but the meta is the meta because people always do that. I actually think that in this game, it's very rare that the meta changes based on player behavior rather than like balance changes of some kind, or the map changes, or like there really seems to be very little, well, maybe not very little, but not as much organic change in the meta and how people approach matches as I would expect and I've seen in other games. For example, I don't know if you guys have played League of Legends, but I think many of the listeners have. And if they had played League of Legends at the start, junglers were not in the meta. If you went jungle, some people would actually tell you off in the same way that some people will tell you off if you go to the side as a destroyer. And I would say that in this game, as a destroyer playing off meta a little bit can actually make a huge difference. For example, on Tears of the Desert, what happened as well is that everybody congregates with the battleships near that one cap zone, and then they just fight and shell each other. But on the opposing team, one destroyer came through the middle and just launched torpedoes at the spot where the battleships usually sit at. And this actually gave the opposing team a massive advantage because nobody expected those torpedoes. And as a result, those torpedoes did a lot of damage. Now, if we had to play in a way where we expected the torpedoes to come, we couldn't actually sit there in the so-called perfect position anymore, and we would have to do something else. And this would give the opposing battleships also some way of, dealing with what we're doing. And I think this kind of a meta change is possible, but we need more time and people need to actually try it out.
I think you make some pretty good points, Arun, and I think Vanessa makes some good points. I think the problem with ranked is frankly that it's supposed to be the individual, it's supposed to be rewarding individual play because you're not allowed to do teams of any kind. But the problem is that it doesn't reward individual play because unless you get good RNG for your team. And so that's my big problem with ranked. And maybe we'll talk about that's one of the reasons I want to do this analysis and see, what are the numbers and do these numbers make sense? So I'm trying to get some numbers together and maybe we'll do a little article on that. But that's all the time we've got this week. We actually went quite a bit longer than I kind of expected. Next week, we are not going to, we'll be on hiatus. I'm going to be on vacation. So we will not have a podcast next week. And you guys got a podcast early this week because I leave on Thursday for my flights. But that's it. Arun, Vanessa, did you guys have anything to add before we wrap it up?
Just at the game. I like this game. I like this game a lot.
I think we all do. Certainly people that listen to us, that's for sure. But yeah, as always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. If you are looking for some podcast swag, we've started up a store on Spreadshirt.com that makes podcast branded shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, mouse pads, and other cool things. The URL is shop.spreadshirt.com/Warships Podcast. And we, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself, as it really helps us make these episodes. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.